The truth was supposed to stay buried. But in Port Charles, secrets never stay hidden for long. And this time, a shocking discovery in Manhattan may change everything. A mysterious woman, 2 abandoned suitcases, and a name that suddenly has the entire police department on edge. Delilah Wilson. For weeks, questions have surrounded the young woman's sudden disappearance. Rumors have spread, theories have exploded, and no one in Port Charles seems to know the full truth. But now, a new clue has surfaced. And what Dante Falconry just learned may finally crack the case wide open. Inside the Port Charles Police Department, tension filled the air. Dante stood near his desk, reviewing the latest report that had just come in from New York. The message was brief, but the implications explosive. Someone matching Delilah Wilson's description had been seen exiting a train in Manhattan. Not only that, but the woman had left something behind. 2 large suitcases. And now those suitcases were on their way to Port Charles for investigation. For Dante, the discovery raised more questions than answers. Why would Delilah abandon her luggage? Was she running from someone? Or was someone chasing her? As Dante processed the information, another familiar face entered the room. Harrison Chase. Chase had heard about the suitcases and immediately offered to help examine them. But Dante quickly shut the idea down. The situation was complicated. And Chase's recent demotion meant he could no longer participate in detective-level investigations. Chase clearly didn't like hearing that. His frustration showed. Still, Dante wasn't willing to bend the rules. Not now. Not when the stakes were this high. The search for Delilah Wilson had suddenly become much bigger than anyone expected. And deep down, Dante had a feeling they were only scratching the surface. Across town, another emotional storm was brewing. At Maxie Jones' apartment, the tension was almost unbearable. 2 best friends stood face to face. But at this moment, they looked more like enemies. Lulu Spencer, Maxie Jones. And standing between them, whether he liked it or not, was Nathan West. The argument had been building for days. Unspoken feelings, old wounds, and painful misunderstandings. Finally, everything exploded. Maxie's voice trembled as she confronted Lulu. Why hadn't Lulu told her the truth about her feelings for Nathan? Why keep something like that hidden? For Maxie, the betrayal cut deep. It wasn't just about Nathan. It was about trust. And right now, Maxie felt like that trust had been shattered. Lulu tried to defend herself. She insisted that things had already been overwhelming for Maxie. Lulu didn't want to add more pressure. In fact, she claimed she would have walked away from Nathan entirely if Maxie had chosen him. But that explanation didn't make things better. If anything, it made the situation even more painful. Because Lulu finally admitted something she had kept buried. A small, selfish truth. She was glad Maxie hadn't chosen Nathan. Because if Maxie had, Lulu would have lost him forever. The room fell silent. Maxie looked stunned, hurt, confused. For a moment, neither woman knew what to say. That's when Nathan stepped forward. He could see the damage unfolding right in front of him. And he hated it. Nathan reminded both women of something important. Their friendship. That bond meant more than any romantic drama. More than any relationship. And watching them destroy that friendship over him. It wasn't something he could stand by and watch. With that, Nathan made a difficult decision. He stepped away. Sometimes people need space to figure things out. And right now, Maxie and Lulu needed that space. But once Nathan left, the emotional walls between the 2 women slowly began to crack. Maxie's voice softened. She admitted something that had been eating away at her. It hurt, more than she wanted to admit. Not just because of Nathan, but because Lulu hadn't trusted her enough to tell the truth from the beginning. For Maxie, it felt like she was losing everything at once. Nathan and Lulu, her best friend. But Lulu wasn't about to let that happen. Without hesitation, Lulu reached out and grabbed Maxie's hand. Her voice was steady, emotional, but sincere. Maxie wasn't losing her. She never would. Because Maxie wasn't just a friend. Maxie was her person. Those words hung in the air. And slowly, the anger between them began to fade. But even as peace started to return, a new question lingered. If Nathan wasn't the problem, then why did it still feel like something bigger was coming? Meanwhile, back at the police station, the investigation was moving forward fast. Nathan soon joined Dante to examine the mysterious suitcases that had arrived from Manhattan. Both men knew this moment could be critical. If Delilah Wilson had truly abandoned these bags, then they might hold the key to finding her. Carefully, they opened the first suitcase. Clothes, personal belongings, nothing unusual. But when they opened the second suitcase, everything changed. Inside were several documents, gallery brochures, invitations, and references to multiple art galleries. But one detail stood out above all the others. A name, printed clearly across several papers. Delilah Wilson. Dante and Nathan exchanged a serious look. This wasn't coincidence. This was confirmation. Delilah Wilson had definitely been connected to these suitcases. Which meant one thing. She had been in Manhattan. But the bigger mystery remained. Where was she now? And why did it feel like someone wanted her to disappear? Elsewhere in Port Charles, a much more delicate situation was unfolding inside General Hospital. In the NICU, a tiny baby girl had become the center of attention. Known only as Baby Jane Doe, the child had been fighting for her life. But now, there was hope. The baby had finally been removed from the ventilator. Her condition was improving. And that small victory meant everything. Standing nearby was Brooklyn Quartermain. She desperately wanted to hold the baby. But hospital policy made that impossible. Only certain staff members were allowed physical contact. Still, Elizabeth Baldwin offered a small compromise. Brooklyn could sit beside the baby, talk to her, keep her company. And that's exactly what Brooklyn did. Softly, she leaned closer to the incubator. Her voice gentle, warm. She spoke to the child like a mother comforting her daughter, encouraging her to stay strong, to keep fighting, because she wasn't alone anymore. Someone was looking out for her. Someone cared. But just as the emotional moment deepened, the NICU doors opened, and Chase walked in. He had news. News connected to the suitcases found in Manhattan. And the name Delilah Wilson. Suddenly, the baby in front of them felt even more important. Because if their suspicions were correct, this child might hold the biggest clue of all. And what Chase revealed next would leave everyone stunned. But the real shock was still coming. Because across town, another secret was about to explode. A secret hidden inside Jordan Ashford's purse. One small item. One unexpected discovery. And when the truth finally comes out, Port Charles will never be the same again. Across Port Charles, emotions were running high, but one moment at General Hospital was about to shift everything. Inside the NICU, the quiet hum of machines filled the room as Brooklyn Quartermain sat beside the tiny incubator. The baby girl inside had already fought so hard. For days, doctors weren't even sure she would survive. But now, there was hope. The ventilator had been removed and her breathing was stronger. Still fragile, but stronger. Brooklyn leaned closer to the incubator and gently placed her hand on the glass. Her voice softened, almost like she was afraid the moment might break if she spoke too loudly. She told the baby how brave she was, how strong, how she had already beaten the odds. Brooklyn promised something else too. Something that came straight from the heart. No matter what happened, this little girl wouldn't be alone. But just as the emotional moment deepened, the NICU doors quietly opened. Harrison Chase stepped inside. He had just come from the police station, And what he had learned there made this baby's situation even more important. Chase approached the incubator slowly, his expression serious. He told Brooke Lynn about the suitcases that had been discovered in Manhattan. The ones believed to belong to Delilah Wilson. Inside those suitcases were several documents connected to art galleries. But more importantly, they confirmed that Delilah had recently been in New York. Which meant something else. Something far more troubling. Delilah hadn't just disappeared randomly. She had been traveling, moving, possibly running. And now the question everyone was afraid to ask suddenly hung in the air. Where was she now? And why had she left her baby behind? The thought alone sent chills through the room. Brooke Lynn looked down at the tiny child inside the incubator. The possibility was heartbreaking. If Delilah really was the baby's mother, then this little girl had already lost more than anyone realized. Chase gently reached into the incubator area and carefully placed his finger in the baby's tiny hand. And then, something unexpected happened. Chase began to sing. Softly. A simple lullaby. His voice wasn't perfect. But it didn't need to be. The moment was real, pure, and filled with emotions. Brooke Lynn watched quietly as the baby's tiny fingers wrapped around Chase's. For a brief moment, all the chaos of Port Charles faded away. But outside the hospital walls, that chaos was growing stronger. Back at the Port Charles Police Department, the Delilah Wilson investigation was moving quickly. Dante Falconry and Nathan West continued reviewing the contents of the mysterious suitcases. Each document raised new questions. Art galleries, private invitations, connections that stretched far beyond Port Charles. Nathan leaned back in his chair, thinking carefully. This didn't look like the life of someone who simply vanished. It looked like someone who had plans. Someone involved in something bigger. Dante agreed. The more they examined the evidence, the more it became clear that Delilah Wilson's story was far from simple. And then Nathan pointed something out. If Delilah had been traveling through Manhattan, someone must have seen her. Someone must know where she went next. Which meant one thing. The search was expanding. Port Charles wasn't the only place connected to this mystery anymore. And if they were right, the answers might be waiting somewhere far outside the city. Meanwhile, another situation was quietly reaching a breaking point. At Jordan Ashford's home, the atmosphere was warm but uneasy. Stella Henry had stopped by with a late housewarming gift. But she quickly noticed something unexpected. Curtis Ashford was living there. Stella was surprised. After all, Curtis had recently given the house to Portia Robinson. Seeing him move in with Jordan so quickly raised some serious questions. To Stella, it felt like things were moving too fast. But as she chatted with Jordan, something else caught her attention. Jordan's purse sat open on the nearby table. Stella reached inside to grab a pen. And that's when she found it. A small box. At first she didn't recognize it. But the moment she read the label, her expression changed instantly. A pregnancy test. Stella froze, her mind racing as the shocking possibility formed. Could Jordan really be pregnant? If so, everything in Port Charles was about to change. But the real explosion hadn't happened yet. Because later that day, Jordan and Portia crossed paths. At a quiet nail salon, Jordan sat beside Ada Justine Turner, trying to relax during a rare break. Moments later, Trina Robinson arrived with her mother, Portia, for a little pampering. The atmosphere seemed normal at first. Light conversation, casual laughter. But the peace didn't last long. Suddenly, Jordan's face turned pale. She stood up quickly and rushed toward the bathroom. Portia noticed immediately. As a doctor, she recognized the signs. Jordan looked sick. The kind of sick that made Portia remember something all too familiar. When Jordan finally returned from the bathroom, Portia approached her carefully, trying to sound casual. But her eyes were searching for the truth. She joked that Jordan looked exactly the way she herself had looked earlier at the Quartermain tea party. Green around the gills. And then Portia said something that was meant to be playful, but suddenly felt very serious. What if Jordan was pregnant too? Jordan's reaction said everything. She turned away quickly. Her silence spoke louder than any words. And in that moment, Portia realized the truth. Jordan really was pregnant. Portia stared at her in disbelief. Her voice barely above a whisper. You've got to be kidding me. Because this pregnancy could change everything. Relationships, friendships, even long-buried secrets. And if Jordan thought she could keep it quiet, she was about to find out just how wrong she was. Across town at Charlie's pub, another conversation was quietly shaping someone's future. Sonny Corinthos sat listening as Giovanni Gio Palmieri played guitar. The music was soft, thoughtful, full of emotions. Sonny watched carefully. He could see the passion in Gio's eyes. But he also saw uncertainty. Gio wasn't sure where his life was headed. Sonny leaned forward, giving the kind of advice only someone with experience could offer. If music truly mattered to Gio, then he needed to commit to it. Follow the passion, or find something else that gave him purpose. Sonny suggested Gio take a class at PCU over the summer. Try new things. Figure out what direction his life should take. Because drifting through life without purpose, that never ends well. Gio nodded thoughtfully. Sonny's words clearly meant something to him. Sometimes all someone needs is one person who believes in them. And for Gio, that person might just be Sonny. But while some people in Port Charles were searching for direction, others were about to collide in a storm of confrontation. Because Jordan Ashford's pregnancy was no longer just a secret. Portia knew. And that meant the truth couldn't stay hidden much longer. The tension between the two women was already building. Years of complicated history. Unspoken resentment. And now, a baby that could change everything. If Jordan thought this situation would stay quiet, she was about to face the fight of her life. Because Portia Robinson was not someone who backed down easily. And when these two women finally face off, the fallout could shake Port Charles to its core. Meanwhile, the mystery surrounding Delilah Wilson continued to grow darker. The abandoned suitcases. The gallery connections. The baby left behind in the hospital. Every piece of the puzzle raised new questions. And one terrifying possibility lingered. What if Delilah didn't abandon her child? What if she never had the chance to return? If that theory turned out to be true, then someone out there might know exactly what happened to her. And that someone might be closer than anyone realizes. But now the question shifts to you. Do you think Jordan's pregnancy will bring Portia and Jordan closer together or push them into an all-out war? And what about Delilah Wilson? Is she truly missing? Or is someone in Port Charles hiding the truth about what really happened to her? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you enjoy daily General Hospital spoilers, recaps and theories, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next twist coming to Port Charles. Because if there's one thing soap fans know, the biggest shock is always just around the corner.